Yeah. There we go. Don't say anything about it.
I went to Rome and I found this 1820s big round gilded frame, and I took one of the pictures from an exhibition I had cut into a circle yesterday. So I got that. So I've Monticello, Thomas Jefferson House.
I have a lot of catching up to do.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, so we're going. That's good. I'm leaving here and driving right to Dickinson's parents' weekend. He's watching on YouTube. I guess there's a YouTube access to watch. If you want to do the
So when you go to say hello,
I will. Yeah. Okay.
all right, Mary is making her way down. People are grabbing seats. You know what? Well, this is our section for going up from Mount St. Good morning, everyone. If I could ask everybody to take a seat. Is everybody here? Good. I am Canon Claire Woodley. I am a family friend, and I have met many of you before. And here we are again, all together again after only 6 months. So, welcome. Take a seat, take a deep breath, close your eyes for a moment. Let's celebrate Liz. O God of grace and glory, we remember before you this day our sister Liz. We thank you for giving her to us, her family and friends, to know and to love as a companion on our earthly pilgrimage. In your boundless compassion, console us who mourn. Give us faith to see in death the gate of eternal life, so that in quiet confidence we may continue our course on earth until, by your call, we are reunited with those who have gone before. Amen. If you would like to say the Psalm 23 with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Nina.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Okay. Tissues. Sorry. Okay. I will get through this. I loved and adored my mother, and her death is a huge loss. How does one eulogize such a big life? She showed up for me every step of the way, and I am so grateful for all the amazing memories. Who was Elizabeth Lahm Heller? She was a social worker. She was someone who lost her mom at age 14. She had an incredibly bright mind, but most of all, she was someone who wanted relationships and connection. When she moved to Edgemont in 1967, she made lifelong friends in the neighborhood. Alan and Sandy Siegel, Sue Friedman and Hank, the Nierenbergs, the Liddens, to name a few. I would come home after school, and Mom would be holding court on the couches in the foyer, between the dining and living room, or in the kitchen. She was a fiercely loyal and a devoted friend. Some of you are in the room today. In 1970, my father bought a small cottage in Salisbury, Connecticut. Mom said, no TV, only reading, board games, and talking. We had many lovely memories that we shared there. Excuse me. One in particular was the night I was sleeping on the top bunk and I felt a fluttering on my naked belly because, of course, there was no air conditioning in the 70s, right? I thought it was a bird. I climbed down the bunk bed, went into my parents' room, and tried to wake them up. They told me to go back to bed, but I insisted. Dad begrudgingly got out of bed. As he entered the bunk bed room, yes, indeed, there was a creature there, a big black bat. Dad told Mom, who proceeded to put on her horseback riding helmet, grabbed a fly swatter, attached a needlepoint needle to it, and she sat under her covers, ready to defend her territory if need be. Dad got out the vacuum cleaner, sucked up the bat, and put it in a coffee can and then let it go free. You had to be there, but it was fabulous. As I grew older, Mom and I traveled together. I was living in Belgium, and Mom came to visit me, and we went to Brussels and Ghent and Bruges. The first night she arrived in Brussels, we decided to go to a karaoke bar and met the United States Women's Olympic basketball team. We all became fast friends and had a wonderful night singing and laughing. Mom loved meeting new people and finding out about their lives. In her 80s, Mom and I took a princess cruise together to Honduras and Belize and a bunch of other places. And we did this so Mom could play bridge and so we could spend time together. We had a wonderful time in our little tiny stateroom. And I made sure Mom got golf carts so she could see the islands comfortably. The last trip we enjoyed together was in Houston, Texas. When Mom and I went to museums from Twombly to Rothko, we always had a joyful, loving time together. When Mom and Dad moved to Larchmont and Mom wasn't moving around as easily, I would visit regularly to give Mom pedicures and massages. One day she said, "You know, Nina, we've changed places now. You are the mother, and I am the child." I said, "We've come full circle, and I'm happy and grateful to be able to take care of you." When my father died in early March, it was completely unexpected, and I immediately moved into Mom's apartment to take care of her. For 2 months, I lived there, and the love between my mother and I grew exponentially. She would light up every time she saw me, and we would spend hours playing cards. Having friends over for lunch, and of course the head rubs. We sang songs every day, and Mom would join in remembering words to songs I'd forgotten. Karen, through her contacts, was able to find Bibi, who took gentle and loving care for Mom 24/7. Bibi patiently explained what she was doing and allowed Mom to choose how she wished to be cared for. Mom adored and treasured Bibi. Mom would say to me, "Why didn't we have Bibi from the beginning?" I wished we could have, too. William and I visited with Mom 2 days before she died. And the last conversation I had with her was the day she died. I got on the phone with her for the second time that day. I said, "Mom, I just want you to know that you are an incredible mother. And I love you with all my heart. And if you want to go and be with Dad, I totally agree. And I love you." And Mom's last words to me in her loving voice, "I love you too." Mom, I hope you and Dad are in loving embrace. And Dad and Mom, may you both rest in peace. Thank you.
Larry.
Wow, thank you, Nina. In the week following Liz's death, I found myself thinking about her on long walks. In the process, I felt like I got to know and love her more deeply. It's funny how maybe that can happen, how you can get to know someone more afterwards. So in that process, I reflected on a story that captured some memories of her. After her passed, there was a flurry of cleaning in the apartment. We were all there. I took on the top of the kitchen cabinets where Liz had perched an extensive collection of green ceramic vases. And after pulling them down and examining a few for their craftsmanship and origins, most from rummage sales, of course, I put them back in the same locations in order, well, for the most part, that is. While up above, adjusting on one cabinet above the fridge, I glanced down at Liz and noticed her scowl. Right? It was that all too familiar look she gave when something was off. And I asked, I said, "Not right? How then should they be arranged?" And she said, "Not in a line, staggered." And I complied, and she'd wave her hands until I got them back into her position. Liz was sharp, she was perceptive and discerning in art as she was in life, and especially so when something was amiss. I found Liz also notable for not keeping this keen awareness to herself. Right? She was forthright, really forthright about expressing her concerns, opinions, desires, and she wasn't overly concerned if in her delivery she was occasionally experienced by others as a little bit abrasive. That was okay. And it seemed to me that her approval and acceptance, for me anyway, it had to be earned through words and actions. And Well, so looking back, my most memorable early lesson on this discerning aspect of her character was during my wedding 30 years ago. During setup, the aesthetics of our wedding ceremony were at risk despite monthly planning. Like, it had really been laid out. How was it possibly upset? Well, my dad and his brother, chronic pranksters, had started to install plastic pink flamingos around the pond. And this was an outdoor wedding hosted by dear family friends of Liz and Herb, with property backing up against the mountains. And the flamingos, a flock of 50, right, were first gifted to my dad by his uncle on his 50th birthday in 1985, and they'd ever since been appearing at family and friends events. So this was going on. Fortunately, I wasn't far off. I saw a disaster brewing since they'd caught Liz's eye, and this scowl of hers, perhaps the biggest I'd ever seen, like spanned all of her features. As she made a beeline for the brothers, I did as well, but I was at a full run since I was much further away. And there was no question as to who I was going to ally myself. So before anyone could speak, I jumped in, first providing Liz with a 2-sentence explanation about this family tradition. And then I assured her that the flamingos would be moved right away. A compromise was quickly achieved whereby they were relegated to the parking lot, and even there, only a small gaggle. So it was toned down. My dad and uncle traipsed off, dragging their 4 black trash bags filled with flamingos, while Liz and I exchanged a look. And it was a look in which I knew right then I'd earned my position as an acceptable son-in-law. So, of course, Liz never forgot this incident. And until very recently, she made certain that a steady stream of flamingo decor would arrive at my parents' doorstep, which they obligingly scattered about their house and even to this day around their much smaller retirement community apartment. And sort of this mutual flamingo delight my parents shared with Liz and Herb over 30 years was immeasurable. And it was just one of many bonds which formed across our families. And I think Liz, she used her witty humor and that outburst of laughter that she gave. And art and culture, especially even flamingo art, was used as a means to connect deeply with those she cared about and who cared for her. So really remembering her. On the vases, in these past 6 months when I visited, I'd bring down flowers because I knew that was something that she loved. She loved flowers. She understood beauty. And we had flowers on our property. I brought some down today. It's almost like habitual packing up flowers for her. And in this case, rummage sale vases, some pretty nice rummage sale vases. They weren't hers, they're ours, and it's like we took on that tradition as well. So there's so many ways that Liz is living on for many of us, and she'll be dearly missed and remembered. Oh, I have a picture. My mom was the family chronicler, and she actually captured my dad and my uncle setting up those flamingos. And what's missing from the picture, of course, is Liz. That you just have to imagine that yourselves, right? So I'll leave that on the memorabilia table.
Thank you, Larry. Carol?
Hi, everybody. Most of us have aunties we remember, right? My sister and I had great Aunt Dorothy, 2 Aunt Dotties, Aunt Lydia, and Liz. We had Aunt Liz. Aunt Liz was my mother's youngest sister by 11 years and was the closest to us in age. She had a great laugh. She was very tall, as I remember her from my child eyes. And she was famous for her photograph posing behind a bubble in Life magazine, as you all might remember, when she was in college. And we got to be at her wedding, and we got pictures taken with her in her bridal gown. It was a big deal. Over the years, we kept in close touch. Our growing families visited each other at Thanksgiving and Christmas. I remember admiring her giant white towels, her choice of flowered wallpaper in Scarsdale, her beautiful taste as she decorated her various homes. And we ate her famous ice cream cake and her orange cranberry sauce. I stored a lot of my stuff in her attic and her cellar when I moved to Maine. She visited me at crafts fairs and became addicted to some of the clothing designers who she met there, and she continued buying clothes from them even when I wasn't doing crafts fairs anymore. She was a classy dresser. I once bought a large square wool paisley scarf that she admired. I went to the store with her to get another one. She got hers. She liked mine better. I lent her mine. I never saw it again except when she wore it. We shared a love of costume jewelry too, and we regularly compared finds of wild and often flashy items we found. She bought more sterling, I bought more plastic, but we bonded over the hunt. She also loved art, as we all know, and we went to museums together. She would alert me when there was a good show in the city, and we would try to meet up when I was in town. She volunteered at the MoMA membership desk, and she bought me my first artist pass. When she moved to the Whitney membership desk, I would look for her on volunteer days, and often she would get me in for free. Ditto the Broadway theater scene. I would call her up when I came into the city, and she would recommend which shows to get tickets for, and we went together when we could, and we attended Judy's Cabaret to hear David play and Judy sing. When I decided to go to the Arts Students League in New York in the 90s, we had more time to hang out together. She had an apartment on 72nd Street at the time, so we'd enjoy the city without commuting, and she did it with gusto. At one point, when I couldn't find a winter rental, I went for 6 years in a row. She convinced a neighbor in her building to rent me his empty apartment for a ridiculously reduced New York City rent while he was between tenants. His previous tenant had broken the lease because she complained about the pigeons outside her window who wouldn't stop nesting there, and I had to promise not to complain in order to get the rent. Over the years, we sent a lot of newspaper and magazine clippings back and forth, and then we did Christmas and birthday gag gifts that I've already talked about when we were here together last. I have a lot of stories, obviously. This story, when over the years she would collect bits and pieces, she once gave me something that looked just like this. This is cast iron enamel, but she gave me the bottom first, and then like a few years later, she gave me a top that fit but didn't match. This was sitting outside my neighbor's house yesterday. You know, when somebody visits you and you don't think they're really, then there they are. So like this neighbor is moving away, saving her last things to give out for her neighborhood. She's putting them out in the front yard for free. And this was there. I mean, that is so weird to have that happen. So I feel like here she is visiting us again. Anyway, my auntie lives. She lives in my heart. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. David.
Liebe Tante Liz, dear Aunt Liz. May sound odd to start off in German, but that was the beginning of the first letter and probably the only letter I ever wrote to Liz, and it was completely in German. It was a high school German class project, that homework assignment, and I sent it to her, and she called my father, her brother, and was very confused. But from there, the thing I remember about Liz and always felt about Liz is that she's just bigger than life. She filled any room she walked into with her personality, and no one can deny that. In preparing for this, after I learned that Liz had passed away, I took our family photo albums out and I looked through them and looked through all the pictures of Christmas, all the pictures of Thanksgiving. Two pictures stood out the most. One was, I only remember from the picture, I do not remember from being there, although I was there. I was there in my mother's belly, along with Karen in her mother's belly. And it's a picture of Liz and my mother sitting in lawn chairs, cigarettes in one hand, martinis in the other hand. It was a different time, and somehow we survived. But that was her personality. And the other picture was a great picture of Liz, Joan, and my mother all standing together, and our grandfather and grandmother Molly, I think, had a bit to do with it, had given them all plaid wool ponchos, and they were all wearing their ponchos. And you probably remember the ponchos. And they were all standing very proudly wearing their ponchos. And that was one of the rare, from that period of time, one of the rare pictures in color. So I know somebody else took it, not my father, because he disdained color photography. But Christmas and Thanksgiving, those are always my biggest memories of Liz and Herb and the Hellers, because we always got together. And one year, Christmas would be at our house, Thanksgiving at the Hellers, and then vice versa, and so on down the years. One of my favorite things was always going to the Hellers for Christmas, because just like Liz's personality was larger than life, her putting on a party was larger than life. You'd walk into the Scarsdale home, and the first thing there would be this huge tree, bigger than I'd ever seen. I was young, and all. And just the food, the warmth, the family, it just said it all. And then the snowball fights afterwards in the yard with the local kids. But Thanksgiving, fantastic food. Again, the warmth. One of my biggest memories from Thanksgiving at the Heller house was 1982. I was about 2 months away from shipping off to my first tour in Germany in the Army. And it was obviously a trying time for our family and all. I flew in that morning from Fort Knox. Herb picked me up, and we had a fantastic home holiday. And it was probably the last one I had for a while. But Liz knew how to send you off right. And I hope we're able to send her off right here. Some of the things when they would come up to our house, you know, the Hellers, more city, suburban people, the Lambs, at least the Mort Lam side of the family, more rural side of the family. We lived in a very rural area. One time on a holiday, the Hellers were up in the mid-70s. I was a volunteer fireman, and the fire alarm went off, and I had to leave to respond to a fire. And the alarm that goes off is loud enough to wake everyone up in the house, so everyone got up and came downstairs, and Liz, you know, watched me go out the door and drive off, and she said, "Isn't that nice? What's he gonna have, coffee and donuts for the firemen when they get back?" And my mother looked at her and said, "No, he is the fireman. He's going to fight the fire." And Liz was shocked and a little annoyed that 16-year-olds were fighting fires. But that was, you know, the difference between the rural and the city. In many ways, we were different people, but we were always each other's peoples. We were our people. It has been said before about the presents. Liz was famous for her presents because they always came from the heart and the rummage sale. And we all had a very eclectic collection of presents from Liz that we all cherished. There is one present which I still cherish. It was one of my first, and I still have. It was a record. Those of us who are a little older remember what records are. And it was a record of a whale song. And and I still have it. I still play it. It still brings me peace. Liz was almost the last of her generation. It was pointed out that David Laum is the other David Laum is technically part of that generation. But of the generation of my director, when I look up, Liz was the last of that generation. And before, I always looked up, and Liz was there, Herb was there, my mother, my father was there, and now I look up and I see sky. And so that means that our generation has to pick up the torch, and our generation has to pick up the torch and carry on with the humor and mirth that Liz was famous for. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Jake?
Speaking of the last of the generation, this is a brief letter from David Laum to Liz, and to all of you, actually. I hope you all have something which I do not, but I wish I did. That would be a saved voicemail from Liz. I'd like to hear her again, her wonderful, warm contralto. She called me often, just to stay connected, and I learned from her likewise, to do so likewise. She was a terrific phone buddy. What Liz said to me made it clear that she had listened and really heard everything that came out of my mouth. My cousin had a dry sense of humor that paired perfectly with her formidable intelligence and a way of expressing herself that was the furthest thing from what we call small talk. It may sound weird, but I think Liz was born too soon, a few decades further along in our evolution as a society, and her clarity of mind would have shown as a competence, even distinction, in a chosen profession. But even then, I'm sure she would have taken the time to call me up now and then. I miss you, Liz.
Thank you, Jake. Karen?
When Herb Heller passed away this past March, he charged me from his hospital bed with taking care of so much left undone. First and foremost, he told me to take care of his beloved wife for the remainder of her life. She is now gone to join him, and I am sure they are playing gin rummy again. For those of you who weren't around, for many months before his death, Dad tried to engage Mom in games as a way to stimulate her interactivity. He was always more high energy than she. Mom resisted, just like she resisted many activities, but finally she lit upon gin rummy. And the games were nonstop once she got started. She literally wore my dad out, and he would call us to come over and play with Mom and give him a break. They played gin rummy, not rummy. To honor their departure, I want to share with you the rules of gin rummy. They're simple. The rules are that the players do not lay down their sets and runs until they are prepared to end the round. Then the points are counted. And here we are. Mom outlived Dad by just 6 months. It is a common tale, but in this case, everyone thought she would pass first. In that 6 months' time, Mom physically declined a little bit every day, but she had no pain, no distress, no hunger, no worries, no demands. She lost the ability to sit up and only wanted to lie in her bed, so she was accommodated. Her final 6 months were made beautiful and peaceful because Nina and I hired a very special woman, Bibi, to live with Mom and take care of her. It is hard to express the quality of love and care Mom received. Her every demand and need were met all of the time. She was able to lie still and reflect. She also ate very well every day, right up into her last breath. Bibi made her homemade soups, as soup was easy to swallow, and Mom loved soup. She wanted grapefruit daily, so even out of season I hunted for fresh grapefruit, which Bibi would peel and section for Mom to enjoy. Bibi sourced an adult sippy cup for Mom, so Mom could lie in her bed and drink without fuss or mess, as she wished. On her last day, Julia and I visited her earlier that day and then went out for a while. Mom waited for us to leave, and for Bibi to leave the room for a moment. Then, as mothers often do, she chose her moment to join Dad. Mothers are a protective lot. As for me, with Bibi's care and love, I feel I succeeded in accomplishing my father's request. Here's a poem by New Yorker Edna St. Vincent Millay that reminds me of Elizabeth Pauline Lom Heller. It is called Dirge Without Music. I am not resigned to the shutting away of loving hearts in the hard ground. So it is, and so it will be, for so it has been, time out of mind. Into the darkness they go, the wise and the lovely. Crowned with lilies, with laurel they go, but I am not resigned. Lovers and thinkers into the earth with you, be one with the dull, the indiscriminate dust, a fragment of what you felt, of what you knew, a formula, a phrase remains, but the best is lost. The answers quick and keen, the honest look, the laughter, the love, they are gone. They are gone to feed the roses. Elegant and curled is the blossom, fragrant is the blossom, I know, but I do not approve. More precious was the light in your eyes than all the roses in the world. Down, down, down into the darkness of the grave, gently they go, the beautiful, the tender, the kind. Quietly they go, the intelligent, the witty, the brave. I know, but I do not approve, and I am not resigned.
Thank you, Karen. Julia?
Hi. Just a poem I wrote for Grandma. Dear Grandma, Gramps once said, "You're so easy to love," as he played you birthday piano. To him, you were his guiding star, and there's no telling how far he'd follow. When my faith was shot, you said, "How dare you not?" and sealed with a hug gave me space to take my shot. Showed up and stayed at every stage to cheer and clap and support all the way. You'd crunch your nose and shake your head at every off-color thing we said. But you were a rebel at heart. In the crowd, the in-crowd set apart, purveyor and lover of a life of art. You never stopped giving the latest Times clipping, the thrill of the find. We were always on your mind. And you'd be the first to say not to paint you as the paragon of virtue. Don't worry, I won't go there. Instead, I'll just say your rough edges only speak to a life fully lived with lessons to teach too. You are forever immovable, matriarchal family glue. We need nothing material to know we're all a piece of you. So you see, it will always be that flowy clothes and Broadway shows and jars of round hard candy will fill me up with joy and love as you've graced our life with your legacy.
Thank you, Julia. Sky.
That was really amazing, Julia. Now I'm going to read a poem, but I did not write it. For everything, there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak.
Thank you, everyone. So many wonderful memories and feelings about Liz. I dare say everyone in here has at least one wonderful story about Liz. And you will note that in your service bulletin, there is a copy of Larry Child, whom you heard earlier, his Liz Bingo. And how many of these exquisite Liz-specific experiences you may have had through your friendship with Liz is something that I think will warm your heart, give you joy, and start the storytelling ball rolling as we gather afterwards in the foyer. It's hard to believe that we're here only 6 months later after her, but that we're all back here together again at the same time. I'm sorry, are you trying to tell me something, Alice? Peter! Who could possibly have missed Peter? Oh, I guess that was me. Come on up, my dear.
Good morning. Well, you know, one of the ways of sort of processing the passing of somebody is to recreate wonderful stories, as you were mentioning. And just for example, I am now double the age that I was when I first met Liz. So Liz and Herb were my parents' best friends, and they were my godparents. And just to tell you how long ago that was, I referred to them probably until this year as Mommy Liz and Daddy Herb. So my son, Elio, who is joining us from Dickinson College because he couldn't be here, I used to bring Elio to Larchmont, and he would tell about his experiences at boarding school in Connecticut, which was in Washington, Connecticut, and very near where Salisbury, where I had spent time at their house in Salisbury when I was a little kid. And it was very cathartic and lovely for me to share my relationship with Mommy Liz and Daddy Herb with my son. So I'm glad that Elio is able to join us through technology today. So just a couple of memories. I have memories of Martha's Vineyard. I have memories of Liz and Herb in Paris when my mom and dad lived in St. Cloud for 18 years, in California, at all of their houses from what was before Barclay Road? Clayton Road. And I mean, we were really, really young at that point. But I have a couple of funny memories. I don't want to take up too much time, but Liz and my mom had a very, very special relationship. And it's sort of an iconic relationship. And one of the ways this was illustrated is that they had a competition to see who could send the most appalling gift for under $1 that they had bought at a flea market or a garage sale. So my father, who was a minimalist, was appalled every time a package would arrive from Westchester at their house in California, and there were like Cinderellas and Yagyu figurines and just everything that was just more and more horrible and funny. Just, breaking all boundaries of what, like, sort of sophisticated New York people would send to each other. And I remember Liz in the kitchen on Barclay Road. And my mom, we would always leave. It was like, I can never get Liz out of the kitchen. She's always in the kitchen. But nobody could talk more than my mom and Liz together. I mean, they were both talkers. And they would sit like for 8 hours and just sort of talk. And I was like the kid stuck in the kitchen. I was hanging out with the Heller girls and trying to pick the bristles out of Carrie's coat, the dog that you guys had as a kid. They would always get these things in her hair. Anyway, I remember that. I just wanted to show one thing. I am still getting this Newtown Bee, which your mom got me a subscription to when I was 9 or 10 years old. And I still subscribe to it. So she's living on to me with my interest in, I was just in Brimfield, my interest in flea markets and antiques, and this paper has written a couple of articles about me and covered the books that I've published. So it's just another sort of poetic and nice circular gesture. But basically, I would just like to leave before we meet in the back, just for everyone to take one instant and remember the spectacularly effusive laugh of this woman. It was big, and it was arresting, and I was always immediately enrolled in that joy. So I would just like to leave us with that moment.
Peter, thank you so much for reminding me about the kitchen at 2 Barclay Road. I met Liz and Herb about 40 years ago. My former husband was Michael Aitchison, and the Aitchisons lived across the road from the Hellers. And I had to pass the Liz and Herb test before we would move forward in our relationship. And I remember going the very first time to this wonderful house and being welcomed in effusively by Liz and Herb. I think I was the first girl that got brought home, and was immediately ushered into the kitchen, where Herb offered me a tuna sandwich. And Liz offered me tea, and we sat and we talked for a very long time. I returned to that kitchen with each of my children. And because Margaret lived in Toronto, and John Aitchison had passed away in 1982, and my parents had been long, long gone, Liz and Herb stood in as grandparents for my boys, Noah, Luke, and Adam. And Liz was the closest thing to a mother-in-law present, and loco mother parentis, that I had. And she was a wonderful, supportive, laugh-filled, tchotchke-giving friend all these years. The one thing that moves through all these stories is the tremendous amount of love. And the tremendous amount of love that Liz and Herb shared with each other. If any of you One of the things that I do as an Episcopal priest when I prepare people for marriage is I say, find couples who have a good marriage and watch what they do. See how they relate with one another. If you can, catch a fight, because that will tell you how they make up and how they stay together. I want to read you something that if any of you have been to a marriage in a church, have probably heard this read. But it is such a wonderful description of the work of love that I wanted to share it with you. It goes like this. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. It's a tall order. That's a tall order. It was written by a person who was a larger than life figure that you could love and hate inside the same minute. Anybody else besides me have somebody like that in their life? Yeah, you love them. They drive you crazy. You want to be with them. You're never talking to them again. Well, that was the author of this piece, but he knew love because he worked at love. Love is a choice every day. It is not so much an emotional state as it is a choice. But the emotions follow the choice to love and be loved. And one of the things that I noticed about Herb and about Liz, what they chose to love each other again and again, and choosing to play gin rummy every day, hand after hand. If that is not a choice, I don't know what is a choice. I don't know about you, but when I talk with young people and when I do weddings, I remind everybody who's gathered that even though this community may not be ever together again in the same room, each of you are community to those people who are being married. And every time they want to walk away from each other, anybody married ever want to walk away from each other? Our job was to say, give it another chance. Turn around one more time and listen again. And if you need another ear in the room, happy to be there, happy to help. Choosing to love is the great work of life. Because at the end of all things, the only thing that we can take with us is the only thing that continues long after this body has gone, this mortal coil has been shuffled off, is the thing that we remember Liz for is, yeah. You know, there's a process I think that happens after we die, where those places where we drove people crazy, that those two get shuffled off, they get healed. Broken things get mended up, like those Japanese teacups that suddenly have the gold filling in. And that gold filling in is how we remember them, you know, and the gold filling is love, which bears all things, believes all things, and doesn't end. So I remember love. I remember her for holding my children when there wasn't another older person to hold my children. I remember Liz as she sat on my bedside right after my first son, when he was killed. And she took a cold cloth and she put it on my head. And she said, "You're going to be okay, but it's going to hurt for a hell of a long time." A few years after that, she gave me a coat. She said, "I want to keep you warm." and it's just too heavy for me. It was a pressed wool felted coat, which I wear every year. And wherever I go, people go, "That is a fabulous coat." And I thank Liz for that. I am sure that all of us have something fabulous in our lives or on our bodies or in our homes that other people go, "That is fabulous." And you go, "That was Liz Heller." But I want to just take a moment to say that took a lot of work. It took a lot of work. It took work to remember. It took work to pick and pack and send, to clip and fold and to mail. But she did that work day in and day out, and she loved it. And that's the kind of love that doesn't end. So I want to take up the Liz and Herb challenge to continue to choose to love one another. 3 daughters, 3 grandchildren, 3 spices. Choose to love. And choose to take up this great work. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends, but love is work, and love is a choice. Choose love. Amen. Amen. Creator of all, we pray to you for Liz, for all those whom we love but see no longer, especially Herb, who showed up by the way on Liz's last day. And Liz said, "Pick the babies up, they're crying." And then she was at peace. And at peace she passed from the world. So we remember her and Liz together, Herb and Liz together. May her soul and the souls of all the departed, through the mercy and love of God, be in peace. And the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face to shine upon you, lift up his countenance, his shining face on you, and give you peace. And let the people say, you are all invited to come into the foyer, the greeting area in the back of Zion Chapel, and get out your Liz bingo. Cross off as many as you can. And if you find one that you can't cross off, find somebody who does, who did, and ask them the story. Thank you for coming today. And on behalf of the family, love to you.